Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 770. I'm Tom Cagley, your host. Today, we feature our interview with Jess Brock. Jess and I talked about her new book, The Dojo Coach's Pocket Guide, Maximizing Immersive Learning for Agile Teams. This book is really good, but it really doesn't fit in your pocket. We also talked about learning and career pivots. Jess's talk at Agile 2023 helped me reframe how I conceive of dojos as an intense learning environment, not as a transformation technique. Jess's bio. Jess is a dynamic coach, technologist, and author who has been involved in developing technology products since the mid-2000s. Jess attributes her diverse career experience as one of her greatest strengths because it enables her to coach with sincere empathy and experience. Former Agile skeptic, Jess was eventually convinced by a colleague to give Agile a try more than a decade ago. Her personal transformation was so impactful that Jess continues to contribute to the broader Agile community to this very day. Most recently, Jess has poured her energy into immersive learning dojos as a preferred means of developing long-standing skills. She's a proud author of The Dojo Coach's Pocket Guide. Are you ready for an immersive conversation? It's time for the interview. Jess Brock, author of The Dojo Coach's Pocket Guide. By the way, it was an excellent book. Thank you for writing that.
Oh, thank you so much for reading it. I am honored to know folks are getting value from it.
We'll talk about authorship and things like that because I think I think there's a book in everybody. And I know that sounds trite, but I think that sometimes people just need to hear the story of how things came about in terms of creativity. But let's start with the hardcore reason why we're here, and the whole idea of a dojo. There are all sorts of approaches to dojos. There's the small thing that Bob Galen talks about. There's the classic style that I think your book and others really have put forward. What is that, and why should people actually get interested in the idea?
Yeah, if you see the value in upskilling and coaching for learning and developing people so they're equipped to keep up with today's modern world. Specifically, we go back to this notion of, and I'm actually going to cite my book on this. I have a pretty good graphic that I'm proud of in my book that basically marries people and business growth. And that bridge could be something like dojo or upskilling in some form. I see dojo coaching as a way to coach for learning and grow others so they can grow their organizations. Yeah, I mean, that's my very quick introduction definition of it. I know we'll go deeper than that, but it's essential. I mean, the urgency around making sure people are equipped to, develop software and products that are going to last and make businesses competitive in the year 2023 and beyond. It's absolutely vital to make sure that they have the skills to support that.
I was talking to Phil Alvis, who runs a firm on the West Coast, and he made the argument recently that in reality, there isn't as much change as we think there is, and that arguably a lot of what we're doing is reinventing the wheel, and actually in a lot of cases just failing with the same idea over and over and over again. Is it really learning that we're trying to do, or are we trying to break a cycle of failure in the software world?
So are you getting more into sort of mindsets?
I don't know. I think arguably there is always too much demand, and the demand for new, better, changed things just keeps piling up. And I don't know that we have ever addressed any of that. Is it we're just trying to adapt better, or are we actually attempting to re-educate the world around us? Sorry, I woke up philosophical this morning.
No, that's very interesting. So I do think that, and I'm speaking of the Agile industry at large, and really, and I'll take a stab at the tech industry at large. Do I think that a majority of it has been commercialized so that there's this made up demand in areas like we need to do this thing, add this to the list, another tool, another framework? 100%. Absolutely. So I can certainly align to, is there change for the sake of change? What's the true meaning and impact behind it? What are the true motives? I think that it's safe to say that there's evidence of, I don't know, superficial change, maybe unnecessary. Again, changing just to change. Yeah, I mean, I can totally see that, and just from a broader industry perspective, align with that. Not to get, I can get pretty cynical, so I'm trying to hold that back.
I won't utter the words the agile industrial complex in here, but well, I guess I just did. The idea of things like the deep learning that one pursues in a dojo, is that a mechanism for changing the direction of whole organizations? But obviously, it's at a team level, it changes their direction. Do you see it as a mechanism to change how whole organizations might think of delivering value?
No, I do not. In fact, I think that's one of the misunderstandings of dojos and the sort of, they became really popular in 2017, and now you'll see dojo coach roles open here and there at some pretty notable companies. And I think that there's this expectation of, we'll just add more dojos. That's how we'll transform. This is going to replace our transformation. And no, that is not the answer. Dojos are intentionally localized to develop teams and people. And again, coaching for learning. I'm not going to, I know I would probably sell more books and people would like for me to say, transform your organization using dojos, but I won't, because to me, it's false. It's not.
Can't we just tell every team that they should be dojoized? I mean, come on, we can just make everybody go to one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Everyone needs a dojo. Yes. No, you know what? I mean, to walk that back a little bit, I mean, dojos aren't for everyone, in my opinion. You really have to, I talk about this in my book. It's this ideal team mindset or ideal team profile. I call it ready, willing, and available. And if you aren't ready to, get after it, you're not hungry for improvements, you're not energized and enthused. Okay, well, you might want to rethink learning in general. If you're not willing to do what it takes, make learning a priority, unlearn things, admit some truths, look in the mirror. Okay. Again, maybe learning's not the time. This isn't the time for learning. And ready is like, you have to make sure you're logistically available and then you're mentally available to be ready to consume, right? And I really hold true to not engaging with teams and individuals who don't meet ready, willing, and available because of that. It's just a waste of time for everyone. And it doesn't do good for the reputation of learning and that spirit of learning, right? It just turns to a burden and it's ineffective. You don't retain, and it's just not a good time.
I thought that actually that whole ready, willing, and able was, regardless of whether or not you were wrestling with the idea of dojo, was an incredibly important part of the book. And obviously that's just one paragraph or a couple of paragraphs right up front, as a matter of fact. But one of the other things that sort of was interesting in that area of the book was the whole idea of actually sort of triaging or winnowing down, or almost like a dojo sales funnel in terms of deciding which groups. And I guess the thing that sort of stuck in my mind, and I walked around hobbled around because I just broke my ankle the other day. Pain in the ankle, so to speak. Was the idea that a whole team could be put aside for at least some period of time if one person wasn't willing to commit. And I thought that was interesting. Do you have a story of where that's happened and how the person who wouldn't commit, how that worked out for them?
Yes. So I have gone back and forth with coaches on this particular, a lot of topics. And I love it. I love a good, healthy debate. I am not always right, and I'm always growing. And I love surrounding myself with people who also think that way. And it is it's rigid. But I wrote it, and I still stand by it, at least for now. It's that whole adage of, I hate to put it this way, but one bad apple spoils the bunch. And it really, I've had a couple different times where we kind of, okay, maybe so-and-so will convince them. We're charming. I don't know. Maybe they'll see the light. And sometimes they do, but it is, say for instance, if it's a influential voice on the team, this is a tech lead or someone that's a senior something, it can really influence and decide the success of the dojo. I know it's a small nuance, but if you don't get that, I'm not saying, nope, can't dojo with them. I'm saying, hey, what can we do to maybe find a way to address that and not ignore it and sweep it under the rug, because it is important. So we can really be meaningful with our approach to learning.
In the circumstances that you've run into, how have the teams actually responded? And you've said no, right? Okay, this team, everybody's willing, so therefore I'll be brutal for a second. The spend for learning over on the team that's everybody's ready and willing and able versus the team that has a holdout or a couple of holdouts. How have those teams reacted, and is there peer pressure to bring those people around at some point?
So I want to be careful not to alienate or say, well, because of John, we're not doing the dojo, so you can blame it all on him. No, we don't. That's all inside baseball. The dojo coaches notes. No one sees that. However, and it's anonymous when we ask for, hey, are we in or are we out? So we don't know who said no. Now they might come forward and say it, and that's fine. But we definitely want to create this whole, well, you ruined our chance kind of thing. It's something to sort of pause and reflect. And honestly, I don't see when someone pushes back and it's like, I don't know, or no, this is a straight up no. I respect that. They care. That's, to me, is a sign that they care, that they're invested, that, hey, maybe a little protective of their team. That's okay. That can be a really good thing to harness. In fact, a lot of I'm thinking of a certain dojo in particular, but there are a couple that come under this dojos where it was like, maybe not right now. And we came back just a few short months later, and they were incredible dojos. I think it almost instills by accident a sense of ownership. Like, this really is my journey. They're not going to come in just because my leadership thinks this is a cool thing for us to do. They really do honor willingness, and that the team has to buy in. The team owns this.
4 principles. You've named the 4 principles. Are they hard and fast? Are any of those budgeable?
Maybe at some point, but I think I'm still fresh. So I'm going to say, I want to say yes, but no, not in this moment in time. I'm going to say no.
Why would you want to say yes?
That's a really good question. I think I don't want to alienate or isolate cases, but if you don't have guardrails, you don't have principles, then you compromise quality, effectiveness, blah, 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 right? You got to have some boundaries. So I think I just am a type of person, which I think this makes me, I know it makes me a good coach. I'll own it, that I do strive to connect with just about anyone. I try to be super approachable and warm. And for a team or an individual not to fit because of the principles, it hurts a little bit. So I want to make sure it's for everyone. And I do think the principles are written in a way that it certainly could address most of the cases. I think it's more of a rare or odd exception where it wouldn't work.
Well, it sounds like you haven't yet had to or decided to budge on a principle. But, reading those principles, especially like the ready, willing, and available principle, it sounded like it would be very difficult to get the maximum value out of a dojo if you did compromise and people were only somewhat available.
Right. Well, and something to keep in mind, and I talk to my coaching friends about this because there's different types of coaching. I have a lot of friends who happen to be agile coaches or tech coaches, and they use a different operating model. Our operating model is very fast paced. 6 weeks goes by faster than I could ever imagine. I feel like it even goes faster the more I do it. And by golly, if we have to be crisp on those principles, I mean, to your point, it will compromise the entire engagement. And that, first of all, no one wants to waste time. No coach wants to be burnt out. No dojo program reputation wants to be dinged. I mean, it has effects. So you really have to be mindful of, I don't know, how do I say this? Let me walk it back and say, if I were still an agile coach and I had sort of a long-term relationship with a portfolio or an organization, or I would work to develop the relationships and sort of work through that. But since we only have 6 weeks, that's when it gets a little, are you in or you out? It gets a little rigid.
Have you ever had to pull the plug in the middle of a dojo?
Oh, yeah. Yes, we have. The first one that comes to mind is, you may have heard of this, but we, there was a pandemic just a few years ago.
Vaguely.
Yeah, I don't know. Not a lot of people have heard of it. So anyway, when COVID came and ravaged our world, we were right in the middle of in-person dojos. I mean, right in the middle. And it was just, we all were there. I mean, it was life-changing, life-altering, world-changing, all like maximum, just, I don't know, just shock, right? That's the word I'll land on, is shock. It made sense. I mean, folks were I was trying to figure out childcare. They were trying, like people on the team were trying to figure out childcare and household stuff. Okay, do I have the right machine and equipment to work from home? It was just a mess. So it just made sense. And ended up circling back with that team a while after everything went down, and we just solidified as a remote, offering.
What was that like, actually circling back with someone that you started and then restarted?
I think the benefit is that they kind of already understood what a dojo is like from an experience perspective. So that was a very strong pro in terms of there wasn't a lot of like lead up. It was like, oh, let's just pick back up. Let's start fresh and anew. And they kind of already understood, the 6 week operating model. But the con was, we sorely missed being in person because we were able to have a taste of that. But, hey, we adapt and we were okay.
Are you doing in-person dojos now?
We have occasional sessions. They're in person, but no, we do not do full 6 week dojos in person, unfortunately.
Interesting. So they're hybrid at this point, it sounds like.
Yeah, I would even say it's a stretch to call them hybrid, mostly remote, occasionally hybrid.
Seems like there is a gathering storm in terms of pressure to bring people back into the office. Do you suspect that you'll be doing in-person dojos in the future?
Not like we once were, where the entire team was in person. I think we'll still have to navigate video conferencing. That'll
end up being the hybrid kind of model. I think that's actually harder. Yeah, at least.
It is. I concur with that. Yeah, I don't think we'll ever be co-located again. I hope I'm wrong. I truly do.
Yeah, I'm torn. I've seen a lot of organizations gathered together, or at least put together groups, and I'm sometimes hard-pressed to call them teams, but at least groups of interesting individuals with interesting talents and capabilities from a lot of different places that I don't think they could if they were all had to be in Hoboken, New Jersey. I don't know. I'm picking on Hoboken today. I don't know why. Senior leaders in dojos. What's the role of senior leaders in dojos?
For the team's perspective, we really want to get senior leaders bought in to supporting the learning. So, hey, you know what? During the 6 weeks, we're going to learn by doing, but understand that we're not going to be delivering at the rate at which the team probably was delivering, right? I mean, there's going to be interruptions. You're going to have just the pure fact you have 1 to 2 strangers infiltrating your team and shaking things up. I mean, we'd be foolish to think that there was no impact. There's absolutely an impact from that alone. And then on top of that dynamic, you add the learning, right? Your brain's occupied with, hey, how can I grow? And then maybe attach that to yourself individually, or how do you apply that to the team? So there is a cost. I call it, I used to call it slow down to speed up. And I think that's what I called it in the book.
Yes, you did.
But yeah, I want to revise that and say slow down for learning, slow down for growth. This is a short-term investment. And that's what I ask of the leaders. I say, hey, make that space, maybe do a little bit more air cover. Let's do some purposeful planning to give the team that space for the 6 weeks. I meet with the senior leaders weekly, sometimes bi-weekly, just depending on the schedule, but regularly to keep them clued in at the appropriate distance. We're not snitching, but we're giving them advice on, hey, in order for this learning to stick and this growth to stick, this is where you could really help. So connecting those dots.
This is all about learning and growing. How long does that magic sauce of working together as a team, learning how to learn as a team, how long does that exist? How long does it hang on?
Oh, the sort of let's learn and grow as a team.
Yeah. Does it forever, or is it one of those things that sort of tails off over time as the organizational culture nibbles away at it?
Yeah, until they get humbled by returning back into the wild, right? Oh, we're off our field trip. No more hall pass. Yeah. Yes, I do think that there is some natural, what's the word? Don't want to call it regression, but there's going to be some friction.
De-evolution?
Yeah, there you go. You re-enter the world, right? And there's just some friction. There's some growing pains to try to adapt now that the dojo's over. A little bit on that is, I do not consider a dojo a success unless after, I say 90 days. And why I do that is we check in with the team deliberately at 30, 60, 90 increments, day increments. And to me, that's sustainable growth, that stuck, so to speak. Sometimes some of it doesn't. Sometimes some sticks more than others. Sometimes none of it does. But at that mark, we're going to call it a close, and that's effectively the whole dojo story, right? That team story. We do see that sort of degradation of learning spirit happen, but there tends to be, for a good while, at least up to the 90 days, awareness on, hey, we really do need to experiment. We need to innovate. We need to look inwardly on how we can develop our skills and be a better team.
What's a 60-day check-in look like?
60-day? So just to be clear, and then maybe I'm just going to be clear about it. This could be implied, but 6 weeks happens. We're down in the weeds. We're doing the thing. We're doing the dojo engagement, all about hands-on learning by doing. And then after the 6 weeks concludes, 30 days after that, we'll connect with the team. 60 days we'll come back. And then 90 days we'll come back. And 90 days is the final checkpoint. 60 days, what I find, now again, I have to disclaimer, it depends. I got to lean on the favorite phrase. It's like the coach's go-to phrase. Never, whenever I hear it depends, it makes me feel like you're afraid to be wrong. No, I'm just kidding. But in this case, it's truly, I've had teams, I'll make some generalizations. And I think this applies to most teams, is 60 days is usually when we see a little bit more chinks in the armor and, what's going to truly stick, the likelihood of what success is probably going to look like. Because at this point, enough time has passed that if you're still doing it, chances are you're probably continuing to do it until, for another month, until when we meet with you for the last time. You have a good momentum. You found conditions are ripe for success. But if it's going south and you are regressing in some areas as a team, it's unlikely that's really going to do a full 180. And if it does, and I've seen this happen, but it's rare. If it does a 180 and sticks, because something is fighting that. Who knows? It could be discipline. It could be their firefighting. It could be leadership didn't really take the agreement seriously. I don't know. It could be market and industry-wide, macro effects. We've seen all kinds of influences.
The whole life cycle that you describe in the book, I think is, even if you're not going to be, run through a dojo, the idea of that full life cycle of an engagement with a team is just a great idea in its own accord. So that was valuable in its own right. Before we wrap, do you remember your first dojo?
I do.
How did it change your mentality?
Significantly. It changed me significantly. In 2019, I was so burnt out. I was an Agile coach at a global organization, very major company. And if I heard one more thing about one more framework, I was going to lose my mind. I was starting to not believe that an organization itself could truly transform. And then maybe Agile wasn't practical at that level, that size. I felt like I was unfulfilled, that I was working really hard and trying to help organizations within the organization, individuals, teams, all these relationships. I spent a lot of time, put my heart and soul into it, and it just wasn't moving. I wasn't seeing the impact. Or we'd take 2 steps forward and take 3 steps back, that kind of thing. So it was killing my soul. It really was. It was a soul depleter. And I confided in my network. I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I may even get into technology, but I cannot continue my career like this. I feel like a fraud. I'm like, what am I doing here? Because I'm not creating impact. I don't feel like I'm adding value. My network came back and I was like, one of the comments I made was, I wish I'd be closer to product development. I miss making things. I'm a maker at heart. And well, we found this dojo coaching role. I'm like, well, the title sounds cool. I'm intrigued. That caught my eye. So I just looked and glanced, and what really stood out to me is that it focused on learning and growing, and delivery was barely even mentioned. It was like an afterthought. So I'm used to perform, deliver. People? Huh. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right. People. Well, resources, I mean. No. Yeah, I went there. So that was really inspiring. And then it was like, hey, we're not going to, this isn't a L&D role. This is, you're going to use your expertise and get down in the weeds, get down in the trenches, feel the team's pain. And that just seemed really compelling to me. I thought about it. I'm like, maybe that's how transformation works. Maybe that's how growth can happen, because we're actually truly meeting them where they're at. Another go-to coach catchphrase. So anyway, long story short, obviously interviewed, was great. The team was phenomenal. That's probably the best teams I've worked with, team of coaches at that organization I've ever worked with. I was very inspired by them. And so that helped me like the dojo too. I got to give them their credit for showing me the dojo. But I got on my first dojo, and I think it was within the first week of seeing folks, we would coach something like story writing. I don't know. And seeing it immediately being applied, and it just being so effortless and so natural and just organic. And then being able to tweak it, not going from a playbook, not going from a curriculum or set of instructions. And it just felt so real and legitimate and human. And I was like, oh my goodness. And just, it was an evolution. The more I did it, the more I liked it. And I actually just gave a talk at Agile 23 a couple weeks ago. And I went on record to say I've formally abandoned any other form of coaching. This is the only way I can coach is hands-on.
So you wrote a book about it. How did that happen?
By accident. I had no aspiration to write a book. I've never, honest to God, I didn't even read a lot of books as a kid. I didn't find myself to be a good writer. I still think that I'm not a prolific writer. I think I'm more of a functional, like get to the point kind of writer. My book is thin and it's a guide more than a book, I think for a reason. It matches my style. But anyway, I gave a talk about dojos. Folks can clearly see that I'm passionate about it. And a friend of mine in the industry said, hey, I know you've like wrote blogs and did some talks on dojos. Have you ever considered writing a dojo, writing a book? And dojo could be the topic. I'm like, well, if there's any topic, let me tell you, that would be the one I'd write about because I've never been so passionate about a professional topic. And so she connected me to Barrett Kohler. I ended up getting COVID in August of 2020, I think, or August 21. I can't remember, but it was in August. And I wrote the proposal in a fever dream.
Oh, no.
Because of the COVID I had. Mm-hmm. And Barrett Kohler accepted it. And I was like, what? And I mean, it was a long proposal. I mean, they think about submitting to write a whole book and, them investing in that and stuff. And I almost thought I was still in a fever dream when I read the email back. And I was like, really? And I just went after it. And I had an amazing support group. I had someone who was actually was a leader of mine at one point and has become a dear friend of mine. She was my accountability coach. We'd meet once a week for like 30 minutes. And she's like, where are you? I was like, yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. And that helped.
How many words have you done this week?
Exactly. That was the conversation. And I can't thank her enough for that. And just, the field experts that came and reviewed, and Barrett Kohler was a joy to work with. People go back and forth. Do you want to get into agreement with a publisher, or do you want to self-publish? For this first one, I'm so glad that I had a publisher. I mean, they were just a phenomenal partner and continue to be. So that was it. It was an accident. It was literally, I think, a one sentence LinkedIn direct message. And then it was a forward. She forwarded me and connected me with the BK editor. The rest is history.
Excellent. Well, it's an excellent book. If you woke up tomorrow morning, somebody handed you a cup of whatever your caffeinated beverage of choice is and a magic wand and gave you two wishes with that magic wand that you could impact any two things impacting dojos, what would they be and why?
Sure. So it would definitely be coffee. That would be what I would be holding. Big fan. This is a really good question. So I'm going to take it a little bit more broad and say coaching in general. I would like to educate and equip coaches to harness the power of hands-on learning and growing, getting past theory, getting past verbal, not to dismiss, but I think in order to really facilitate growth, you got to dig in. So I would sort of make it more of a household name and make it so where it's approachable as a competency, not an alternative. The other thing I would change, and again, this is not specific to dojos. I'm getting a little big here, and I'm also getting very lofty. So warning on that. Yeah, I'm going to dream big here. So you'll see how much organizations will spend on product development. I think I write a little bit about this, but I mean, I just touched the tiny tip of the iceberg, and I think I hit on Google as a case study. And Google spends like billions, right, in product development. No big deal, right? Sure, they do that every year. But how much do they spend on growing their teams? And it is, I think, on average, like $1,200 a year per person. and it comes nowhere near. I mean, it is like a single-digit percentage of the spend for product development. And I just wish that there was the same urgency. There's a mindset shift that in order to achieve success in a market and be a competitor and thrive as a business, you need your people to be confident, equipped, seen, valued, that, hey, I do invest in you. I hear you. And then I'm going to show that by investing in you, not just, placating you with fancy words and big speeches. I'm going to make time for you. Whether you leave me tomorrow or not, that's okay.
Yeah, you get into those hard conversations. The corporate training market is actually an $80 billion market in the United States. That is a chunk of change. My problem, and I've been having this sort of existential crisis with all training, regardless, is I don't think anyone can tell me whether or not it's effective and whether or not, at an academic level, right, that the techniques that are being used are effective, right? That especially remote training, which is the big thing. It's everybody's doing remote training. And it's like, oh my God, what do you mean you don't have people with their cameras on? What do you mean that you don't have a mechanism to know people are paying attention? You're just throwing your money away. But, that's me being crazy again. Jess Brock, author of the Dojo Coach's Pocket Guide. How can people continue the conversation?
Oh, good question. So I try to make it easy. JessBrock.com.
There you go. I think, as you know, at this point, I open up the platform for you to promote anything that you'd like. The platform is yours.
You know what? I have my book. You can reach me at JessBrock.com. I don't really have I don't have an organization that, I don't have a coaching consulting business or anything like that. The one thing I'd advocate for is Agile Careers, which is a nonprofit that I'm helping to set up. I would love to give pay some love to that organization. We've had a lot of success this year, as you can imagine, with the job market not being so hot. Been able to place people and connect them with recruiters and help develop their career. So looking forward to continuing that work. So I would say look out for more developments with Agile Careers. But other than that, any form of DEI initiatives like Agile in Color or Women in Agile, I'm pretty passionate about. So I would always like to pay that out.
Excellent. Well, again, Jess, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you for spending time with the Software Process and Measurement Cast SPaMCAST listeners.
Thank you so much. I am delighted to be associated with SPAM.
In Reread Saturday News, the epilogue was the end of the original version of Made to Stick. Later editions had extra material added. I'm reading from the 26th printing. That has the added materials. We'll cover the extra material titled Sticky Advice next week. Today, we discuss the epilogue without wrapping the book up. It feels wrong. By the way, I read this chapter more deeply knowing there was more to come. It felt less of a recap and more of a how to use the book kind of piece. 3 items caught my attention during the read. Check it out. Link in the show notes. In the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 771, we'll complete our summer theme on critical thinking. Critical thinking might sound esoteric or academic. However, I think that categorization is both wrong and misses the point. Critical thinking is a survival skill. We also have a visit from Jeremy Barrio and his Agile Corner. If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?